October 29th, 1873, the Great Comstock Silver Strike. You are there.
Walter Cronkite reporting, October 29th, 1873. Gould, that first cry rang out in 1848. El Dorado in California, a challenge for high adventure surpassed only by a second cry from the West in 1859. Bonanza, silver discovered in Nevada's Comstock lode, silver and gold ore mixed. The country's imagination took fire. Men surged toward the glitter of sudden wealth in the mines of Gold Hill and Virginia City, and sudden wealth they found. Almost $100 million taken from the Comstock before the mines began to play out. Now in 1873, no one would dare predict a third electrifying cry from the West's most active mining capital, Virginia City. To almost all appearances, even the Comstock is finished. Almost all appearances. But the most discouraged observer must admit there's a strange, mysterious activity trying to lift Virginia City's depression today. A strange new story. October 1873. Is the fabulous Comstock lode really played out? Why then are John Mackey and James Fair pouring money into their mysterious operation from the shaft of Virginia City's Gould and Curry mine, a night operation with no public inspection permitted? And who's trying to gain control of apparently worthless Virginia City mining stocks on the San Francisco Exchange? Could it be stockbrokers Flood and O'Brien, the partners of Mackey and Fair? Bonanza or stock manipulation? Which is it? The West mining experts are beginning to look curiously toward Virginia City, and the San Francisco newspapers are beginning to ask pointed questions, and so are we. Our reporter in San Francisco is in the midst of something that might be informative. All things are as they were then, except you are there.
This is Grant Holcomb speaking from the offices of James Flood, the man seated at the desk, and William O'Brien over at the window, both San Francisco stockbrokers. The angry man is William Chapman Ralston, one of the most resourceful and daring financiers on the coast, the man who organized the Bank of California.
And put a stop to it if I have to call in the Department of Justice to do it.
Bill, I just can't understand talk like that from you.
It's the only kind of talk men like you do understand.
Oh, now, wait a minute.
I've waited long enough. You tell your Virginia City boys, Mackey and Fair, their peekaboo game is over. Either they found ore or they haven't found ore.
It seems to me that you stand to gain as much as we do from the increased values in Virginia City.
The Bank of California is not involved in any stock inflation plan.
Neither are we.
You fellas dump that worthless paper on the market, you'll ruin the bank, and you know it. I'm not going to stand still for it.
Oh, you don't have to stand still for it, Bill. You could sell out your holdings to us.
You know I can't do that.
Oh, yes. I've heard that fella Sheridan up there at the bank has got them in pretty deep. What with the bridges, timber, fuel, water, machinery.
Are you going to do something about this?
Well, as long as you're so concerned and convinced that we're building worthless paper values, why don't you sell out for a loss and take, say, 50 cents on the dollar, rather than hang on and lose everything?
This is what's really bothering you, isn't it, Ross? This editorial today suggesting that you're bullying the market to protect the bank's investments.
Bill, no matter which way you jump, it looks like it's going to be wrong. About the only thing you can do is hang on and hope that we're honest.
No. There's one other thing I can do. I can take a page in every newspaper on the coast tomorrow. I can explain that the Bank of California has called in the Attorney General of the United States to make a thorough investigation of Virginia City mining stocks, because the bank suspects deliberate manipulation of the market with a deliberate intent to defraud.
He means it, too.
He never began to question our integrity until the paper started to question his.
What'll we do?
Wire Mackey. He'd never stand for an investigation. Let's send him a wire.
Mr. Flood, I've been waiting to talk to you.
Well?
Why won't your partner, Mr. Mackey, stand for an investigation?
That's nobody's business but our own.
That leaves us only one conclusion, doesn't it, Mr. Flood?
It leaves you with no conclusion at all.
Well, sir, if a man has nothing to hide, I don't see why he should...
Why is it that everyone starts with the assumption that we're dishonest? Look, John Mackey has hundreds of friends in Virginia City. A government investigation would throw that town into an economic chaos, and he'd never permit that.
Well, it sounds to me, sir, as though the answer to that question must come from Virginia City itself. We're set up there, so let's switch to Virginia City and Bill Stout.
This is Bill Stout, and this is the famous International Saloon of Virginia City. We understand that the distinguished newspaperman, Dan DeQuille of the Territorial Enterprise, is on his way here now, and if anyone in town can give us a clear picture of the Mackey Fair operation, it's certainly Mr. DeQuille. But wait, there's something going on here. Slim Bean, a miner, is in the saloon threatening to shoot Jim Fair on sight.
You fellas want to see a murder?
What you talking about, Slim?
Jim Fair just had me fired. I figure I'm taking a shotgun to him.
Slim Bean, you ain't got the courage to murder Mr. Fair.
Right now I ain't, but I figure to lap up courage till I get walleye. And old Slippery Jim better straighten up his accounts.
Mr. Bean, are you referring to Mr. Fair, the partner of Mr. Mackey?
Stand clear. I ain't no conversational mood. He is ready.
You think he'll work himself up to it?
Ain't never seen Slim like that before. You give him a quart of courage. I don't know.
He was referring to Mr. Mackey's partner, wasn't he? Mr. James Fair?
Yeah, that's the man.
Thank you. Oh, there's the man I've been waiting for, Dan DeQuille. Oh, Dan? Dan DeQuille. Mr. DeQuille.
Oh,
We were told we could find you here.
this is where the news is born in Virginia City.
Dan, you've been around a long time as a miner and then a newspaper man with the Enterprise.
13 years.
Why don't you go sit down? The miner on me.
About 13 years, I guess. Along the 4 miles between here and Gould Hill. Blackjack. And I guess in that time they've taken out about $100 million of silver and gold.
Have they taken it all, Dan?
What do you mean?
We're trying to get an idea of what's going on in the Gould and Curry mine. What's really behind this Mackey Fair operation?
Well, I can't tell you what's going on up there, but I can tell you one thing. If John Mackey's a part of it, you can be sure it's a efficient, good mine operation.
At the 1,200-foot level?
At any level. John Mackey's not only a successful miner, he's... The black... John Mackey's not only a successful miner, he's a good man, fine man, one of the finest men to ever swing a pick anywhere.
Isn't it unusual expecting to find ore at that depth?
Jim Fair is one of the cleverest mining men alive. Now then, if those two men think it's worth the gamble, I've got to go along with them.
The question is, do they think it's worth the gamble?
Obviously.
Then you don't go along with the San Francisco papers that suggest all this might be a front or show of activity.
Go sit down somewhere, Charlie. I do not.
Do you happen to know whether they've found any ore?
I don't know what they found up there. But I imagine when John and Jim have anything to tell me, they'll come down here and tell me themselves.
One last point, Dan. 8 years ago, Comstock Silver helped win the Civil War.
That's right.
Certainly, another rich strike today would be reflected in the economy of this nation.
This nation, if John Mackey and Jim Fair's big gamble pays off, it'll be reflected in the economic structure of every nation in the world. Now, excuse me.
Todd Hunter is ready at the Gould and Curry mine. Come in, Todd Hunter.
This is Todd Hunter. I'm speaking from the shed that houses the hoist at the shaft of the Gould and Curry mine. These miners have just come up from the 1,200-foot level, and we've asked them to answer a few questions for us.
We decided we got nothing to say.
Only a couple of general questions, sir. You both working for the Mackey Fair interests, is that right?
It's no secret I work for 'em.
We understand the Mackey Fair operation was working nights.
Day and night. Started day crews about a week ago.
Does that indicate you come out of something down there?
I'll tell him nothing. Remember what happened to Slim Bean?
How can I tell him when there's nothing to tell?
Slim Bean shut off his big mouth.
But he don't know all when he sees it. Day crews only hurry up the work, that's all.
Then you haven't struck any rich ore down there.
Come on, Johnny.
Wait a minute. You fellas must know what's going on down there. You've seen enough of it.
Seen it. We live in it. Can't get out of our hair or clothes. Carry a ton of it around with us.
Well, what does the ore look like to you?
Mister, it just looks dirty to me.
That's right. Ore goes pretty often.
You're a miner working for the Mackey Fair operation?
I'll make my living.
You answer a question or two for us?
Glad to tell you anything I can.
Do you have any idea why this is a closed operation? Why the public or any observer hasn't been permitted to see the operation?
Guess nobody's been curious about it.
We are. Like very much to go down. You get permission.
Oh, I don't think John Mackey'd let you do that.
Why not? That's our question. Why not?
Well, air's foul down there, cramped quarters. Lots of reasons.
Including the possibility that all this show of activity is just an attempt to raise the price of Virginia City mining stocks?
I wouldn't say that.
Why not? San Francisco papers are saying it.
They forget John Mackey and Jim Fair gambling all they got to find an ore yet.
Are they gambling all they've got?
Must have $200,000-300,000 in it. They expect to find rich ore.
Well, there's still no signs of it.
There's signs of it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we've run the drift almost 300 feet now. For the last 100 feet, we've been following a seam of pure silver ore.
What's that?
It's a seam. About eighth of an inch wide.
You've been following this seam of pure silver ore because Mackey and Fair believe it'll lead to something?
Well, Jim Fair's been following it. He thinks it'll amount to something. John Mackey's not so sure. Jim Fair won't give up.
What do you think? You're a miner. What's your opinion?
I'll string along with Jim Fair.
Final question. Could you give us any idea of what they expect to find and how soon?
Well, sometimes these seams will pinch off and disappear. And again, might run into an ore body 7-10 feet wide.
Thank you. You've been very helpful.
Jim, this just came from Flood and O'Brien. I think they're right. We ought to do something about it without waiting any longer.
Just a minute, John. I'd like for you to meet my partner, John Mackey.
Your partner?
That's right. I'm Jim Fair.
Virginia City, they have a nickname for Jim Fair. Obvious reasons they call him Slippery Jim. Bill Stout is calling from the International Saloon. He has something there. Come in, Bill Stout.
We thought we had something just a moment ago when Slim Bean started to leave the bar saying he was ready to get his shotgun. But apparently the miners have calmed him, at least temporarily. Meanwhile, Dan DeQuill is in a discussion with one of Virginia City's most interesting personalities.
You know, we miss Sandy around here, too. I'll be glad to publish this for you, Mrs. Bowers. Your friends will be happy to learn you're back in town.
You're such a nice man, Dan. I'm going to do you a favor. Dan, do you know what I saw in my peepstone last night?
What'd you see, Mrs. Bowers?
Immense bodies of rich ore. Deep, deep underground.
Where did you see it? South, under the Gold Hill property?
It wasn't south, Dan. It was here. Up here by the Ophir mine. It was very deep, and it extended far, far to the north. Buy stock, Dan, as much as you can.
Thank you, Mrs. Bowers.
Thank you, Dan. Always so nice to see you. Good day.
Goodbye. Nice to see you.
Who was that, Dan?
It was Mrs. Sandy Bowers of Washoe Cirrus. She and her husband were probably the first millionaires in Comstock. I imagine they took out $1 million a year for 4 years straight out of that Gold Hill mine. Now, that's the way life is in Comstock. One day you're a millionaire, the next, well, right now she makes her living out of whatever she can get for gazing into that crystal peephole.
Well, Dan, if Mrs. Bowers and her husband were the first Comstock millionaires, what became of Pete O'Reilly and Pat McLaughlin and old Pancake Comstock?
You heard of them, huh? Well, you see, they were mining their claims for gold. They kept throwing away that blue mud that was cluttering up their cradles, never knowing that they'd discovered silver.
How'd they find out?
I can't tell you how, but I can tell you when. It wasn't until after a fellow by the name of Judge Walsh bought them out for several $1,000s each.
Dan, you better head off Slim here. He's outgunning from Mr. Fair because Mr. Fair fired him.
Just off your obituary column, Dan. Old Slippery Jim. We'll see how slippery old Jim is when I beat my shotgun on him.
What'd you do? How'd you happen to get fired?
I didn't do nothing.
Well, you must have done something. Now, how did it happen, Slim?
I'll tell you how it happened. Me and Stanislaus, we was standing out in the drift, and we picked up a couple of hunks of ore, and we was standing there looking at it. And up comes old Jim Swede as a rattlesnake, and he says to me, he says to Stanislaus, he says, well, son, how much you reckon that ore will assay?
What'd Stan say?
Well, you know how ignorant Stanislaus is. He don't know country rock from chloride ore.
We know that, but what did he say?
Well, he pretending like he knows. He said that ore ain't worth crushing.
What did you say?
Well, let me have a drink here. Bartender, let me have a drink. Well, Jim asked me, and I told him. I said that ore's worth $2,000 a ton if it's worth a cent.
Is that when he fired you?
No. He nodded, and he smiled, and he says, you're a miner. The next thing I know, I was called to the cage, and I was fired flat.
Well, maybe that's why he fired you, Slim. Maybe you saw too much chloride ore in that rock. He said you was a miner, didn't he? Maybe you know too much for his good.
Hey, that's why he done it, boy, the slippery old son of a gun. Well, I do know what's going on down there. And I ain't working for him no more, and I'll tell you all about it.
Now, Slim.
They struck it big, the darndest mass of silver chloride ore you ever seen.
It did, huh?
And I'll tell you for your paper, Dan, $2,000 a ton if it's worth a cent. And the vein's 40 feet wide and 25 feet high.
That's a lie.
Well, I seen it with my own eyes. I guess I know what I want.
Hello there, miner.
Howdy, Mr. Fair.
Hello, Dan. Been looking for you.
How are you, Jim?
John and I have a favor to ask if you feel like helping us out.
Anything you say, I'd like to help you.
If you have the time, there's something over at the Gould and Curry that we'd like to show you.
Time right now.
Good. We'll go over there right now.
This is Bill Stout in Virginia City. Grant Holcomb in San Francisco has been trying to reach us. Take it, please, Grant Holcomb.
Grant Holcomb in Mr. Flood's office in San Francisco. There have been several major developments in this duel of tremendous financial pressure since we spoke to you last. Among them is...
Well, I sent the second wire. I can't understand what's happening up there. Did you tell him what Ralston did? I didn't mince words this time. Did you stop by his office? Just long enough to see the senator come out. I see, so he's gone through with it then. Even if they are jolted into action by this second wire, there still won't be enough time to... Thank you. Mackie? Well. Let's go over to the auction lunch saloon.
What are you going to do, buy it back?
Mr. Flood, if you have a minute, I'd like to...
Well?
Sir, the wire you just received from Mr. Mackey, could you give us some idea of what it said?
Young man, would you like to get rich?
Would I like to get rich? Well, what is that?
Buy Consolidated Virginia mining stock. Buy it wherever you can get it and for whatever you have to pay for it, but buy it right now, today.
Well, Grant Holcomb in San Francisco, returning you to Virginia City. Todd Hunter speaking. We're somewhere under Virginia City with Mr. Mackey.
We'll wait here.
Mr. Mackey, when we requested an interview, we didn't expect to be 1,200 feet underground. Where are we exactly?
We're about 300 feet from the Gould Curry shaft, directly under the Consolidated Virginia mine.
Oh, that's the so-called barren mine that you and Mr. Fair bought because you had so much faith in it?
That's right. We felt the property must have ore deposits, lying as it does between two rich mines.
And this is the first time that anyone not working here has been permitted to inspect the operation, is that right?
That's correct.
Well, Mr. Mackey, this is a great honor. We appreciate it indeed. But to be truthful, I'm afraid I don't know silver ore when I see it.
Here comes a man who does.
Hello, John.
Hello, Dan.
Hi. Jim tells me you got something down here you want to show me.
Some people are saying Consolidated Virginia stock is selling for far more than it's worth. The truth is, it's never sold for one half its value.
But, aren't you the man that's always advising everyone not to buy mining stock?
You know what I tell them, Dan. Put their money in a savings bank.
John, I told Dan we wanted him to come down here and take a look for himself and go back and write his own story.
That's all we ask.
That's fair enough.
One more thing. A lot of people have misunderstood our intentions. I want you to know personally that We've never tried to create false values, nor exploit them. We've staked everything we have, win or lose, on this operation.
You don't have to tell me that. I've known you boys a long time, remember?
Thanks, Dan. Go ahead. See what you think.
Come on, Dan. Follow me through here. No. Can't be.
What do you think?
Where did you cut into this body of ore? How big is it?
It's the top, isn't it, Jim?
It's the top, all right. I blocked it roughly. Traced it all the way down to the 1,500-foot level. North into the California Central ground.
Silver chloride. This is the richest ore I've ever seen.
It looks even richer in the California ground.
All the walls. Street goods. Black silver sulphurettes. Walls. Floor. Stephanite. Black crystal stephanite like a coffin of diamonds.
You're writing the story, Dan.
What did I say? $500, $600 a ton?
Take along some samples and find out. Don't try to guess at it, Dan. We want you to write it the way it is.
Write it the way it is. This is probably the largest body of silver ore ever discovered anywhere in the world.
Yes, I think so.
Standing right in the heart of the Comstock. Looking at $130 million. And you tell me to write it the way it is.
Dan DeQuille headlined his story in the Virginia City Enterprise the next morning, The Heart of the Comstock. He had taken 7 samples of the ore and had them assayed, but the results of all his computations were so incredible, he deliberately cut his estimate in half when he wrote for publication, there was visible in Consolidated Virginia $116,748,000 worth of the finest silver ore. So in 1873, once more the cry rang out from the Comstock. Bonanza, the big bonanza. And once more the country's imagination took fire. The greatest bonanza in history. How much was it really worth? An expert from the United States Mint said $300 million from the barren ground alone. The world's money exchanges trembled. Bismarck ordered Germany off the silver standard. In the ancient capitals, London, Paris, Rome, Athens, Madrid, men read the news and felt the glittering fever. They read how it happened. 1,200 feet under barren ground in Virginia City, where John Mackey and James Fair won their big gamble. October 29th, 1873, the big bonanza of the Comstock lode. What sort of a day was it? A day like all days, filled with those events that alter and illuminate our time. And you were there.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.